William, don't go anywhere. Call me back immediately. Urgent. The text from my lawyer hit my phone just as I was getting ready for dinner with my daughter. I was a retired architect, a man who believed he was living out his golden years in quiet peace, unaware that my beloved child had been systematically draining my life savings of $3 million. A luxury mansion, expensive cars, and a ruthless plan to have me declared mentally incompetent. You won't believe what I did next to turn the tables. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're listening from in the comments. The scent of cedar filled the air. I adjusted the Windsor knot of my tie, my fingers moving slowly with the practiced grace of a long-held ritual. It was a familiar routine on a Friday evening. At 68, routine becomes a quiet friend. This tie, a rich navy with threads of silver, had been a gift from my wife, Susan. Now, 2 years after she'd passed, it was just me, the tie, and the silence of a house far too big for one man. I walked the length of the hallway, the soles of my dress shoes making a soft click on the oak floorboards that we had installed together. I paused, a habit I couldn't break, and straightened the silver-framed photograph. "I'm off to see Claire," I whispered to the smiling woman in the picture. "I'll tell you all about James's soccer game when I get back." These Friday dinners were the last bright string that connected me to the life we'd built. They were a promise I kept to her and to myself that I wouldn't fade away into a quiet grief. I reached for my charcoal gray sports coat, the one I reserved for these occasions. It felt good to make an effort, to be the father Claire could be proud of, the grandfather who visited and still looked like he had a place in the world. Just as my hand touched the wool sleeve, the phone on the hall table buzzed. A short, sharp beep. I glanced at the screen, thinking it was a text from Claire asking what kind of dessert to buy. But the name displayed was Ben Carter, my lawyer, my friend of 30 years. The message was only 5 words, but they landed with the weight of an anvil. "William, don't go anywhere. Call me immediately. Urgent." My first thought was of him. A heart attack? An accident? My fingers fumbled as I tapped his name and brought the phone to my ear. It rang twice before he picked up. His voice wasn't panicked. It was worse. It was tightly controlled, stripped of its usual warmth. "William, are you alone?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes, Ben. I'm about to leave for Claire's. What's going on? Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he said, and the words offered no comfort at all. "Listen to me very carefully. Are you sitting down?" I sank onto the long bench by the door, the sports coat still clutched in my hand. "Ben, you're scaring me." He took a slow, deliberate breath, the sound a rasp over the line. "I should have called sooner. I've been reviewing your estate documents, the updates we made 6 months ago. In the process, I requested a full statement from your retirement funds, your investment accounts, the primary portfolio." He paused. "William, there's a problem, a very big problem." I waited, the silence stretching. "The reports I've been getting have been fine," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Claire sends them every quarter. The numbers are steady." "William," Ben said, his voice heavy with a sadness that went beyond the legal, "the reports Claire has been sending you are fraudulent. They're doctored PDFs. The real statements from the banks tell a different story." The room seemed to tilt. The scent of cedar vanished, replaced by the metallic taste of fear. "What? What are you talking about? What is this?" "Over the last 2 years, since Susan passed, someone has been systematically liquidating your assets. The brokerage account is nearly empty. The retirement funds have been bled dry through a series of transactions. Your entire life's savings, the $3 million you retired on, it's almost all gone." Each word was a body blow. $3 million, the entire harvest of my life's work, the security I had built brick by brick for my old age, for caring for Susan, for my family's future, gone. It made no sense. "That's impossible," I stammered. "No one has access to those accounts but me." Ben's next words were very soft, but they shattered the world. "That's not true, William. One other person does. The person who holds your full power of attorney. The one you signed at the hospital when Susan got so sick, so someone could handle things if you couldn't." I didn't need him to say the name. There was only one person, the one I trusted above all others in this world. "It's Claire," I said. "She's bled you dry." The phone almost slipped from my grasp. I bent over, burying my face in my hands, the polished oak floorboards beneath my feet seeming to spin. It couldn't be. Not my Claire. Not the little girl whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, the one whose college tuition I'd paid without a second thought, the one whose wedding was one of the proudest days of my life. My mind, so used to being organized and structured, became a vortex of shattered memories. Claire, sitting at my kitchen table a year ago, with a stack of papers in front of her. "Don't you worry about a thing, Dad," she'd said, her smile so bright and reassuring. "The market is volatile. I'll handle the logistics, make sure everything's protected. You just focus on getting well." Another memory flooded back. I mentioning a surprise, large property tax bill. Claire waving it away. "It's all taken care of, Dad. I've transferred some money from the growth fund to handle it. It's all part of the plan." Her words had once been a comfort. Now they were weapons, each one a twist of the knife. The fraudulent reports she'd emailed me every quarter, always with a cheerful note attached. The way she'd gently discouraged me from going to the bank myself, saying the tellers were new and the paperwork was a nightmare for a man my age. She wasn't protecting me. She was isolating me. She was building a cage of kindness around me while she plundered the very foundation of my life. Ben was still talking, his voice pulling me back from the abyss. "William? William, are you there? You need to hear me. This is the most important part." I managed a sound from my throat. "Yes. You cannot let her know that you know. Do you understand? You have to go to that dinner. You have to act like nothing is wrong. Smile. Ask about James. Let her believe she is still in complete control. If she suspects anything, she could move what little is left, hide it somewhere we'll never find it. She could destroy the records. We need time, William. I need time to trace where all the money went. From this moment on, you're not just my friend. You're my client. And we are in a war she doesn't even know has begun." "I understand," I said to Ben, my voice a cracked whisper. "The performance begins now." I hung up and stood there for a long time, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I picked up the gray jacket from the bench. I put it on, adjusted the collar, and smoothed the lapels. Then I walked out the door, into the cool evening air, leaving the man I used to be behind in the empty house. Claire emerged from the living room, a vision in a cream silk dress. "Dad," she said sweetly, gliding toward me. "You're here." She wrapped her arms around me, a brief, cool hug. It was the hug of an actress, not a daughter. I could feel the sharp edges of a diamond bracelet on her wrist pressing into my back. A bracelet, I now realized, I had paid for. "You look a little tired," she said, pulling back to examine my face, her eyes filled with a glossy, professional concern. "Are you feeling okay?" "Just a long week, my dear," I managed, the words "my dear" turning to ash in my mouth. She led me into the living room, a vast space with floor-to-ceiling glass walls that looked out on an infinity pool and the sparkling lights of the city skyline. On the wall hung a massive abstract painting that I recognized from a gallery she'd pointed out to me months ago, having mentioned its staggering price. On her finger, a glittering sapphire ring, one I'd never seen before. Each detail was a new knife of betrayal. "We have some exciting news," Chris announced, handing me the water. He gestured toward the driveway. "I finally traded in the old sedan. Got a new Porsche. It drives like a dream." "That's wonderful," I said, the words hollow. I remembered the old sedan, a perfectly good Lexus that I'd helped him buy 3 years ago. Claire smiled, the picture of a proud wife. "And my design firm just got the contract for the new Fairmont Hotel downtown. It's a huge project, Dad. We're celebrating tonight." She raised her glass of wine in a toast to her success, which was funded by my quiet ruin. I had to tighten my grip on the water glass to keep my hand from trembling. The conversation at dinner was a master class in misdirection and performance. They asked about my week, but their eyes were glazed over as I talked about pruning my roses. Their interest was a thin veneer. The real subject, as always, was themselves, their plans, their ambitions, their needs. Halfway through the meal, Claire shifted into that serious, concerned tone that I now knew was her most dangerous weapon. "Dad, I was looking over your quarterly reports," she began, and I felt a cold chill run down my spine despite the warm room. "The market's a bit shaky. I was thinking maybe we should reevaluate your investment strategy. Move some of your more aggressive funds into something safer, like long-term bonds. I'm just worried about you, and I want to make sure you're protected for the long haul." It was a brilliant move, a preemptive strike disguised as loving concern. She was offering to protect me from the very volatility she had created by draining my accounts. She was trying to consolidate her control, to lock down what little was left. The audacity of it almost made me gasp. Ben's voice echoed in my head. "Act normal. Don't let her suspect a thing." I took a slow sip of water, buying myself a precious second to compose myself. I looked at her, my daughter, her face a perfect mask of filial piety. "That's so thoughtful of you, my dear," I said, my voice soft but steady. "But there's no need. I have absolute faith in how you've been managing things. You've taken such a weight off my shoulders. I don't know what I would do without you." The relief that spread across her face was almost imperceptible, but I saw it. A slight relaxation in her shoulders, a little softening around her eyes. She had gotten the answer she wanted. My blind trust was still intact. She believed her perfect crime was still perfect. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. They talked about a summer trip to the Amalfi Coast, about kitchen renovations, about the private school they planned to enroll James in next year. Each word was another shovelful of dirt on my future grave, and I sat there, nodding and smiling, playing the part of the proud, slightly dotty father who was just happy to be included. It was the hardest performance of my life. The familiar comfort of my own home had been replaced by the cold realization that I was living on a stage. Every action, every word, had to be weighed and measured. Ben Carter's office was a fortress of order and reason, a stark contrast to the chaos raging within me. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with leather-bound law books stood like silent sentinels. The air smelled faintly of old paper, polished wood, and the strong black coffee Ben always brewed. He wasn't alone. Sitting in the chair opposite me was a woman who couldn't have been more than 30. Her name was Rachel. She had short, dark hair, eyes that seemed to miss nothing, and a stillness that was somehow more intimidating than any aggression. She didn't offer a comforting smile or a word of sympathy. She simply nodded when Ben introduced her as the best forensic accountant he knew, and her gaze met mine with a quiet, powerful professionalism. She was here to analyze a disaster, and my life was the wreckage. "William," Ben began, his voice devoid of pleasantries, "after you left last night, Rachel and I went over the preliminary data. What Claire has been doing isn't just opportunistic, it's a calculated, systematic campaign." He slid a preliminary chart across the table. It was a spider web of lines and arrows, connecting my accounts to shell corporations and high-risk investments. My life reduced to a diagram of theft. "I saw it last night," I said, my voice flat. "The house, the car, the jewelry. It's all there. My money." "It's worse than that," Rachel said for the first time. Her voice was as precise and unadorned as her appearance. "She's not just spending it. She's moving it, hiding it, funneling it through a shell corporation, Elysian Designs LLC, and then into a failing high-risk real estate venture in Costa Rica that your son-in-law is managing. She's laundering your life savings, Mr. Cole, and she's using fraudulent financial statements to keep you docile while she does it." Ben leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "This isn't a family dispute anymore, William. This is a criminal enterprise, and we're going to treat it that way. Here's the plan. It's a two-phase campaign." He took a slow sip of coffee and laid out the blueprint for my counterattack. "Phase 1 is information warfare. Rachel will work in the shadows. She'll trace every single dollar, every transaction. She'll build a complete map of their financial network. At the same time, I'll use legal subpoenas to demand the original, untampered records from every bank and investment firm. We'll build an arsenal of undeniable evidence." He looked at me, his gaze serious. "Your role in this phase is the hardest. You have to continue the performance. You are the grieving husband who lost his wife, the elderly father, a little confused, a little overwhelmed by the modern world. You'll call her, ask her for help with little things. Let her believe her control is absolute. We need her to get comfortable. We need her to get arrogant. Arrogance makes people careless." I nodded, the architect in me appreciating the cold logic, even as the father in me rebelled against the thought of the deception. "That brings us to phase 2, Ben continued. "The trap." He looked at Rachel, who took up the narrative seamlessly. "Your daughter has grown accustomed to a steady stream of cash she can manipulate," Rachel explained, her eyes fixed on mine. "She believes the house is the final prize, the largest, least liquid asset that she will simply inherit when you pass. She doesn't think it will ever be put in play. We are going to put it in play." The plan was simple in its design and brutal in its intent. I would leak a piece of information. I would confide in a mutual friend, one I knew was a notorious gossip, that I was feeling lonely and overwhelmed. I would mention that I was seriously considering selling the house and all its contents to move to a high-end retirement community in Scottsdale, Arizona, to live out the rest of my days in the sun. "Word of a potential sale will trigger a panic," Rachel said, her voice flat, analytical. "It threatens her inheritance and, more importantly, it threatens to bring in outside parties, brokers, appraisers, lawyers, who will scrutinize the very finances she has worked so hard to conceal. Her cash flow from your accounts is likely slowing as the funds dwindle. The house is the end game. She can't and won't let it be sold." "She will be forced to act," Ben concluded, taking back control. "She'll try to stop you. She'll escalate her claims that you're losing your mind, that you're not competent to make your own decisions. She'll overplay her hand. And when she does, she'll walk straight into the legal cage we've built for her, armed with all the evidence of her fraud." I sat there, absorbing the chilling brilliance of the strategy. It was a plan built not on emotion, but on a cold, deep understanding of my daughter's greed. It used her very arrogance as the bait. For 2 years, my passivity had enabled her. Now, a different kind of passivity, a feigned confusion, would become the weapon of her undoing. The pain was still there, a cold stone in my gut, but for the first time since that fateful phone call, it was coupled with something else. I became an actor in the theater of my own life. The first move was deceptively simple. On a Tuesday morning, I called Claire. I deliberately waited until 10 o'clock, a time I knew she would be in the middle of a meeting, a time my call would be an interruption. "Dad?" she answered, a note of impatience in her voice. "Is everything okay?" I sighed, a weary sound I had practiced in the mirror. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry to bother you. It's just these papers from the insurance company. They're talking about beneficiaries and estates, and the words just swim in front of my eyes. Your mother used to handle all this." I let my voice trail off, planting the seed of my feigned incompetence. Her impatience softened, replaced by that familiar, condescending tone. "Of course, Dad. Don't you worry. Just leave them on the kitchen table, and I'll swing by this afternoon and sort them out for you." "You're a lifesaver, my dear," I said. "My mind just isn't what it used to be." It was a lie, and it felt like swallowing glass, but I knew it was necessary. I spent the rest of the morning at home, waiting. When she arrived, I had a cup of her favorite tea ready. We sat at the kitchen table while she briskly sorted the papers, explaining them to me in simple terms as if I were a child. As she was getting ready to leave, I executed the second part of the maneuver. "Oh, dear," I said, patting my pockets with a show of false panic. "I must have left my wallet in your car the other night." What a silly thing to do. "It's fine, Dad," she said, already halfway out the door. "I'll check. Just be more careful." The door closed, and I stood in the silence, my real wallet heavy in my back pocket. I had just created the perfect excuse to visit her house unannounced. The main gambit was set for Thursday. I arranged to have lunch with George Gable, a man I had known for 40 years. We were friends, but more than that, George was the unofficial news hub of our social circle. A story told to George at noon would be common knowledge by dinner. We met at our usual spot, a quiet diner that served the best Reuben sandwich in Boston. We talked about the old days, about our health, about our grandchildren. "You know, George," I began, stirring my iced tea, "this big house. Since Susan's been gone, it's just so empty. The upkeep is getting to be too much for an old man." George nodded sympathetically. "It's a lot to handle on your own, William." I sighed again, letting my shoulders slump. "I've been thinking." A friend of mine moved out to a place in Scottsdale, Arizona, one of those senior communities. There's a golf course, a pool, meals are served, no lawn to mow, no roof to fix. I gave a small, sad smile. "He said all he has to do is decide what's for dinner." Sounds like a dream, doesn't it? Of course I'd have to sell the house, liquidate everything. But what's the point of living in a tomb? George's eyes widened slightly. I saw the gears turning. This was news. Big news. He promised to keep it to himself, but we both knew it was a promise he couldn't keep. While I was playing the part of a weary retiree, Rachel was deep in the digital trenches. That afternoon, she sent a secure update to Ben, who forwarded it to me. Her findings were chilling. The Shell Corporation, Elysian Designs LLC, wasn't just a holding account. It was the primary investor in a high-end coastal resort project near Cancun, Mexico. A project that, according to public records, was wildly over budget and plagued by construction delays. The financial manager for the project was listed as Chris, my son-in-law. They weren't just spending my money on cars and jewelry. They were gambling it on a failing business, desperately trying to keep it afloat with my last remaining savings. They needed the house not just for inheritance, but as one last, desperate capital injection to save themselves from ruin. The call came at 6:15 that evening. I had just sat down with a bowl of soup. The screen showed Claire's name. I let it ring 3 times before answering, my heart thumping. "Dad?" Her voice was tight with a false concern. "George Gable just called me. He said you're thinking of selling the house and moving to Arizona?" "Oh, should I not have mentioned that?" "George and I were just talking. It's just an idea, my dear. The place is just so much work." "Selling the house?" she repeated, her voice a full octave higher. "Dad, you can't. You can't. It's our family home. It's where Mom's memories are. Every room, every corner. How could you even think of giving that up?" The performance was flawless. The grief, the nostalgia, it was all there. But I could hear the raw panic thrumming underneath the surface. "I'm just getting old, Claire," I said, using the affectionate nickname to add a touch of vulnerability. "I can't keep up with the repairs, the yard. I just thought maybe it was time for an easier life, somewhere with a little sunshine." "No, no, no," she said quickly. "We can figure this out. If it's upkeep, we can hire a service, a full-time gardener, a handyman. I can manage it for you. You don't have to lift a finger. Just don't make any sudden decisions. Don't call a realtor. Promise me, Dad. Promise you'll let me help you manage this." Her words were a desperate attempt to regain control, to insert herself between me and an asset she could not afford to lose. She wasn't trying to save my memories of her mother. She was trying to save her failing investment in Costa Rica. The conversation ended with my vague, non-committal promise to think about it, leaving her dangling in a state of exquisite anxiety. I knew it wouldn't take long. Panic is a poor strategist. It always acts too quickly. 2 days later, on a Saturday afternoon, she called. Her voice was soft, almost saccharine. "Dad, Chris and I were just passing through the neighborhood. We'd love to stop by for a few minutes. I talked to my financial advisor, and he's put together a simple portfolio projection for you. I think it will really put your mind at ease about the house." "Of course, my dear," I said, my voice a well-rehearsed instrument of weary acquiescence. "The door is always open." I had an hour before they arrived. My target was a small decorative birdhouse that Susan had kept on the mantel. It was a silly, sentimental thing, but its location gave it a clear line of audio to the main couch. The recording device Ben had given me was no bigger than a sugar cube, a tiny black square with a single, almost invisible lens. I stuck it inside the birdhouse with a piece of double-sided tape, then placed the birdhouse back on the mantel. From the outside, it was just a decoration. From the inside, it was a silent witness, waiting. They came armed with a thick, leather-bound folder. "Dad," Claire began, her voice filled with a practiced anxiety as she sat across from me, placing the folder on the coffee table between us. "Chris and I have been so worried since our last conversation. We talked, and we really think selling the house would be a terrible mistake, both emotionally and financially." She opened the folder. Inside were pages of colorful charts, graphs, and dense blocks of text. "I had our advisor, Mr. Albright, run the numbers. You see?" She pointed to a bar graph. "The market is trending down. If you sold now, you would lose at least 15% of the property's peak value. It's just not a smart time to liquidate such a large asset." I leaned forward, squinting at the pages as if they were written in a foreign language. "Oh, my! So many numbers, Claire. It all looks so complicated." "It is, Dad, but that's why we're here," Chris interjected, leaning in earnestly. "We can help you navigate this. Claire is so good at this stuff. We just don't want to see you make a decision you'll regret." I shook my head, waving a hand vaguely at the folder. "I don't know, kids. All I know is the lawn is too big, the stairs are getting steeper, and Arizona just sounds nice and simple. No charts, no portfolios, just sunshine." I was deliberately being the stubborn, simple old man they wanted me to be. I could see the flash of frustration in Claire's eyes before she masked it with another patient smile. "Let's put the numbers aside for a moment," she said softly. "Think about Mom, Dad. Think about the memories in this house, the garden she planted, the kitchen where we all cooked Thanksgiving dinner. You can't sell it, Dad. You just can't." The emotional appeal was her trump card, the one she always played when logic failed. Hearing her use the memory of Susan as a tool of manipulation sent a shard of ice through my heart. I needed to get out of the room before my own mask cracked. I slowly got up from the couch. "You've given me a lot to think about. Let me go make us some tea. My head is a little fuzzy." As I made my way toward the kitchen, I knew the real performance was about to begin. The moment the sound of me rattling teacups reached the living room, their pretense would vanish. I stood just out of sight, my back against the wall, my own breathing silent. I counted the seconds. Then I heard Chris's voice, a low, anxious whisper. "You don't think he'll actually sell, do you? Claire, the Costa Rica project. The investors are getting nervous. We need another capital injection, and we needed it last month." There was a rustle of paper, then Claire's voice, no longer soft and sweet, but cold and sharp as steel. "He's not selling," she hissed. "I won't let him. He's more far gone than I thought. This Arizona fantasy is all the proof we need. But what if he just goes ahead and calls a realtor? What do we do then?" Chris's voice was thin with panic. A pause. Then came the words that stopped my heart. "Then we take the next step," Claire said, her voice completely devoid of emotion. "I'll prove he's not competent to make that decision. I'll talk to Dr. Miller again, get a more definitive assessment. Power of attorney isn't enough to stop a sale if he's determined. We need a conservatorship. We need complete control. It's the only way to protect our interests, to protect the family." The lie was so profound, so perfect, it was almost an art form. I stayed in the kitchen for another 5 minutes, my hands gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles were white. I made a show of clattering cups and spoons before returning to the living room with a tea tray I had no intention of drinking from. They sat in silence when I returned, the leather folder closed, their faces once again the masks of loving concern. They left shortly after, promising to call, promising to help in any way they could. The moment their car pulled out of the driveway, I went to the mantel. My hands were shaking as I retrieved the tiny recorder from the birdhouse. I sat in my armchair, the one Susan had always called my thinking chair, and plugged the device into my phone with an adapter. I pressed play. The sound of my own voice, feigning confusion, filled the silence. Then their whispers, Chris's panic, and finally my daughter's voice, clear and cold, plotting to have me declared mentally incompetent, plotting to seize control of everything I had left. "We need a conservatorship." I listened to the recording twice. The first time, my heart broke into a million pieces. The sound of my own child plotting to have me legally disposed of was a pain beyond measure. But the second time I listened, something else happened. The architect within me, the one who designed houses and understood stress points and structural integrity, took over. The pain was still there, but it was being encased in something harder, something colder. I was waiting for the next blow, and I knew it wouldn't be gentle. The call came on a Wednesday morning. It was Ben. "William," he said, "it's here. They filed this morning." "Tell me," I said, sinking into my chair. "A petition for conservatorship," Ben read, his voice a flat legal monotone. The petition, filed by Claire, alleged a significant and recent cognitive decline, citing erratic behavior, memory loss, and poor financial judgment. My hand tightened on the armrest. They were twisting my own bait into a justification for my incompetence. "It gets worse," Ben said. "The petition includes sworn affidavits from two of her concerned friends, both investors in Chris's Costa Rica project. They're testifying that you've appeared confused and disoriented. On top of that, there's a preliminary psychological evaluation signed by a paid doctor. It's a medical charade designed to look legitimate." I felt the air leave my lungs. It was a full-on character assassination, a legal document designed to strip me of my name and my very identity as a competent adult. This was the final, deepest betrayal. For a moment, the cold resolve of the architect vanished, replaced by the raw, wounded heart of a father. They were going to win. The lie was too big, too well constructed. Then I heard a low, humorless chuckle from Ben. It was the sound of a predator who has just seen its prey walk into a perfectly laid trap. "Fight it?" Ben's voice was suddenly alive, filled with a cold, thrilling energy. "William, we're not going to fight it. We're going to welcome it. This is the end game. She's taken her private, hidden fraud and brought it into a public courtroom. She thinks she's putting your mind on trial. What she's really done is put her entire criminal enterprise on the witness stand." He took a breath. "She built a house of cards on a foundation of sand. The trap is sprung. She did it herself." I listened, and slowly, the fog of humiliation began to dissipate, replaced by a cold, rising fury. Ben was right. This wasn't their victory. This was their final, fatal mistake. "So, what now?" I asked, my voice finding its strength again. The plan was to let Claire confidently present her case, and then we would use the evidence, the bank statements, the recordings, and Rachel's financial records, to turn the tables and show the court who was truly incompetent. The weeks leading up to the conservatorship hearing were a period of meticulous, relentless preparation. We were no longer reacting. We were building a case so solid, so undeniable, that it would topple the world my daughter had built on lies. We worked on 3 separate fronts, each of us a soldier in a quiet war. Rachel's front was a digital battlefield. In her sterile, minimalist office, she became the architect of Claire's downfall. She pieced together the scattered fragments of my financial life. What she produced was more than a report. It was a weapon. It showed the steady outflow of money from my retirement accounts and the corresponding inflow into Elysian Designs, LLC, her shell corporation. There were timelines mapping every large withdrawal to a key purchase made by Claire or Chris, a new car, a lavish European vacation. The centerpiece was a complex diagram, a map of the crime, as Rachel called it, showing how my money had been funneled through the shell company and invested into their failing Costa Rica resort. It was a masterpiece of financial forensics, a narrative of grand theft told in the cold, unforgiving language of spreadsheets and bank statements. Ben's front was the law. He turned his office into a war room, building the legal framework for our case. He prepared cross-examination questions for Claire's paid witnesses, designed to expose their financial ties to her and Chris. He was building our shield and sharpening our sword. My front was a battle for my own sanity in the eyes of the law. The court had assigned an independent psychiatrist, a Dr. Evelyn Reed, to conduct a competency evaluation. I met with her and simply talked about my life, my career as an architect, the buildings I had designed, and how I managed my daily budget down to the last penny. Dr. Reed listened, her face unreadable, asking sharp, probing questions. At the end of our second session, she closed her notebook and looked at me. "Mr. Cole," she said, "you are one of the most cognitively functional and methodical individuals I have evaluated this year. Your decision to sell your home, from a purely logical standpoint, is in no way irrational." We were building our case, one solid brick at a time, but it was Rachel, just days before the hearing, who found the crack that would bring the entire rotten structure down. She called Ben late on a Tuesday night. "Ben, William," she began, her voice tight, "I found an amendment to Susan's life insurance policy." It was filed 3 weeks before she passed away. The beneficiary was changed from the James Cole Educational Trust to Claire Cole, daughter. Rachel continued, "I've looked at dozens of Susan's signatures. Her signature was always strong, elegant. The signature on this form is shaky, but it's also wrong. The angle of the S is off. The loop on the N is too tight. It looks more like a forgery than the signature of a sick person." This was stealing her final gift to her own grandson. Ben's face became a mask of cold fury. He picked up his phone. "Rachel," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "send me a high-resolution scan of that signature immediately." He then called his own expert. "I need to speak to Daniel Ishikawa. Tell him it's an emergency. I need a professional opinion on a potential forgery, and I need it yesterday." He looked at me, his eyes burning. "The ugly truth just got a whole lot uglier, William." But so did our case. Across the aisle, Claire sat with her lawyer, who painted a masterful picture of my cognitive decline. He spoke of a daughter worried about a father lost in grief, and called witnesses to portray me as terribly confused and emotionally fragile. It was a flawless, damning performance. To anyone who didn't know the truth, I was exactly who they claimed, a broken old man in need of saving. When it was Ben's turn, the energy in the room shifted. He didn't stand up with fire and fury, but with a quiet, deadly calm. "The petitioner has painted a picture of a man in cognitive decline," he said. "We would like to present the court with a more accurate assessment." He called Dr. Evelyn Reed, the court-appointed psychiatrist. "Dr. Reed," he asked, "did you find Mr. Cole to be suffering from any cognitive decline?" Dr. Reed looked directly at the judge. "Quite the contrary, counsel," she stated, her voice clear and firm. "Mr. Cole exhibits exceptional cognitive function for a man his age. He is fully competent." A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. Claire's back stiffened. "Next," Ben announced, "the prosecution calls Rachel Armstrong." Rachel took the stand with the same quiet confidence. A large screen lit up behind her. "Ms. Armstrong," Ben began, "can you please explain to the court what this chart represents?" Rachel methodically, coldly, and devastatingly dismantled Claire's entire story. With charts and images, she showed the steady monthly withdrawals from my accounts, the identical deposits into the Shell Corporation, Elysian Designs, LLC, and the corresponding purchases of Chris's Porsche, Claire's jewelry, and their lavish vacations. The courtroom was utterly silent, gripped by the cold, ironclad story the numbers were telling. Then Ben played the recording. My voice, feigning weariness. Chris's anxious whisper about needing more capital. And finally, Claire's voice, sharp and cold. "If I have to, I'll prove he's not competent to make that decision. Power of attorney isn't enough. We need a conservatorship. We need complete control." A collective gasp went through the room. The mask of the loving daughter had been ripped away, revealing the cold face of a predator. Ben let the silence hang for a long moment before delivering the final, mortal blow. He turned to the judge, his voice now ringing with a righteous fury. "Your Honor," he said, "this is not just about the abuse of a living father. This is a plot that began when this woman's own mother was on her deathbed." He called his final witness, a renowned handwriting expert, Daniel Ishikawa, and placed the life insurance amendment on the projector. "Mr. Ishikawa," Ben asked, "can you tell the court about the signature of Susan Cole on this document?" "The signature of Susan Cole on this page is a forgery," the expert stated flatly. "It is not the signature of a sick, frail woman. It is the signature of a healthy person attempting to copy a signature they have studied." Ben presented his final pieces of evidence, the official insurance payment confirmation showing a 7-figure sum deposited directly into Claire's personal account weeks after Susan's death. She hadn't just stolen from me, she had stolen her dying mother's last gift to her own son. Claire's sobs were the only sound in the courtroom as the judge, her voice cold steel, delivered her verdict. "The petition for conservatorship is denied," she stated, her gaze fixed on Claire. "What has been presented here today is not a case of a daughter's concern, but a shocking and malicious abuse of this court and of the petitioner's own father." She didn't stop there. "This court is ordering a temporary freeze on all known assets belonging to Claire and Chris Cole. Furthermore, I am referring the entirety of this case file, including the evidence of financial abuse and forgery, to the district attorney's office for immediate criminal investigation." The finality in her voice was absolute. The war was over. "This is from your grandmother," I said, my voice thick. "She wanted to make sure you had the best start. Things got complicated for a while, but we fixed it. This is her gift to you, for you." James looked from the paper to me, his eyes glistening. Without a word, he just bent down and hugged me tight. I held him close, looking up at the clear blue sky. In that moment, a profound sense of peace settled in. I had lost a daughter, but in fighting to reclaim my justice, I had saved my grandson's future and honored my wife's memory. In the end, I had reclaimed myself. The battle was over. The silence in my heart was no longer one of sorrow, but of a hard-won peace. This story serves as a stark reminder that true strength is often forged in silence. It reveals how easily blind trust can be weaponized by greed, turning family into the most ruthless of adversaries. The ultimate lesson is not one of vengeance, but of reclamation. It teaches that dignity, once stolen, can be won back through the methodical pursuit of facts. Victory is secured not by anger, but by patience, evidence, and the unshakable will to let the truth, however painful, speak for itself. True justice is found not in the shouting, but in the quiet, undeniable weight of the record. Thank you for listening to the story until the end. If you've ever been through a similar situation or have any thoughts on this story, please share them in the comments so we can discuss them together. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story.